Great to see so many familiar faces, so many new faces, and to see where people are calling in from.
Welcome, everybody. For those of you who are just joining, feel free to drop your name in the chat, what you do. We'd love to hear from you.
We'll just give it another 2 minutes or so, let people arrive. I apologize in advance if while I'm talking you hear any dog barking or shrieking in the background. It's a thing that happens in my apartment, and there's nothing I can do about it.
We're going to get started in just about a minute, but welcome to all of you who are still coming in. It's so great to have you here and to see you all, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It'd be great to hear from you. Thanks so much.
All right, so it's 8:05. I think people will keep trickling in, but let's get started. My name is Philip Golub. I'm a pianist and composer. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I will be one of your hosts tonight, and along with Kathy Tagg. Kathy?
Good evening, everybody. I am in Manhattan. My name is Kathy Tagg. I'm a pianist, composer, and producer, originally from South Africa, but based in New York City since 2001. Feel free to shout at me afterwards if my accent gets in the way. I hope you'll be able to understand, and I shall try to enunciate. Back to Phil.
So Kathy and I are members of the Music Workers Alliance, and as you all know, we have been preparing and planning the streaming justice campaign, which we're launching tonight, and that's why we're gathered here tonight. So thank you all for being here. Now, you're probably aware that there's a lot of stakeholders and industry players who work on issues that have to do with streaming, royalty rates, copyright, and so on. And all those players are fighting for what they need. But what we're doing for one of the first times is we're here to make sure that we're not ignored, that we're fighting for what we need. And when I say we, I mean individual, independent musicians, artists, DJ producers, and so on. So, we need to make sure that we get the changes we need so that we can make streaming an actual sustainable endeavor again, and not just streaming, but recorded music in general, the way it used to be 2 decades ago. So that's what we're here to do. That's what our campaign is about. And I want to just say that up front, because it's very important that as this campaign moves forward, that we can communicate what it's like to be an individual, independent musician, artist, trying to make a living today in the age of the internet, in the age of YouTube. It's important that we be able to communicate that to the press and to politicians. And so, we're going to be asking all of you later on to write some testimonial about your experience in the music industry. And those individual stories are crucial to our campaign. So, we're gonna go on and explain the overview of what we're trying to do, the changes we're asking for, how we can get those changes, and so on. But all throughout, keep in mind what it actually your own personal experience in this industry is. Kathy?
And I would like to encourage you also to, as we go, really think about your testimonials. Carmen, throughout this event tonight, is going to be dropping links into the chat. So if you're able to keep an eye out on that as well, that would be great. Right now, she's going to drop in links to both our survey as well as a link to write a letter to Congress with your story. Let your elected officials know what your story is with streaming. So thank you, Carmen, and for everybody here, keep an eye out in the chat. And we're going to move on now to our presentation.
Great. So we're going to start off with 3 other MWA members. This is Ben, Aaron, and Arend, who are going to talk a little bit about the overview of our campaign, the changes we're asking for, and so on. So Ben and Aaron.
Everybody, my name is Ben Brock. I am a drummer slash percussionist slash producer, and I'm based in New York, but I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. And like Phil and Kathy said, we're just going to go over what our campaign has encompassed for the past couple months. So as anybody who's ever put music out on streaming services know, streaming rates are absolute trash, and they are just not sustainable for making a living within the music industry. Now, if you're curious why music doesn't pay anymore as it used to, virtually all music is for free on YouTube. And we can't fight for higher pay when our music is available for free, of course. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with free music. That's perfectly fine, but it should be our choice to decide if the music is free or not. And if our work can be posted for free without a consent, we can't control how it's sold and make a living. So why this affects every one of us is because of the mass copyright infringement. It devalues all music everywhere and creates an open black market. And even if your music isn't specifically on YouTube, it affects how much consumers will pay for all music everywhere, including each and every one of us. And now I'm going to pass it over to Aaron.
Hey everybody, I'm Aaron, they, them. I'm a singer, songwriter, guitarist, and producer. I live in LA. Thank you, Ben. So why is this the case? Like Ben said, virtually all music is available online for free through platforms like YouTube, hosting content that is shared without our consent. But in order to talk about this problem more, we've got to first address copyright. Copyright is a basic music worker's right. When we make music, our ownership of it is called copyright. This is literally the right that I have to make a copy of my work. No one else has that right unless I make a deal with them. I can sell that to a label, I can license it to a digital distribution company in exchange for money, etc. But the way things work online is, so normally if someone were to use my work without my consent, I can sue them and win. But online platforms have a different set of rules. And in the next slide, we'll talk about those rules. This is all about safe harbors. Platforms like YouTube can't be held accountable when someone else uploads our work because of DMCA Section 512. This protection from accountability is called a safe harbor. Alphabet, which owns Google and YouTube, makes huge profits using these safe harbors to host our files, and they have incentive to maintain this status quo and even admit so themselves in their 10K risk factors. They say we rely on statutory safe harbors for various linking, caching, and hosting activities. Any legislation or court rulings affecting these may adversely affect us. Now, what we want as MWA is for Safe Harbor to work in a fair and balanced manner as it was originally intended, not in a way that offers such absurd privilege to platforms. Impala says it this way: safe harbor steals from musicians by removing their right to deny permission or exact a negotiated price for use of their work. It also just distorts the entire market. They go on to say it limits streaming services' ability to charge enough to reward artists adequately. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Aaron.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Edgecombe. I'm a member of MWA, and I sit on the steering committee. So I know we're just throwing a lot of information at you, but just to carry on that point, this safe harbor that exists in the DMCA Section 512, a lot of people have been doing a lot of work on it for a long while in order to try to make it more effective. I guess fairly recently, just I guess it was about a year and a half ago now, the United States Copyright Office put out a report on the DMCA Section 512, and it very clearly supports this idea that reforming 512 would help to create a balanced market for our work. So I want to just talk a little bit about what's the solution to this situation where we have an open black market for our music. We need Congress to reform and fix the safe harbor law so that it works for us, just like it's been working for big tech companies for the last 20 years. Policymakers have known for decades that the law is unfair, but big tech has just avoided fixing the issue, meanwhile making billions of dollars in secondary profits. At the same time, we need indie musicians to be represented in this process. That's why Music Workers Alliance is here. We don't want just large stakeholders or big tech companies to kind of control the whole conversation. We want to be a part of that. So just to conclude this, and then we're going to get to some great speakers who will kind of give you a sense of this and hear from some other MWA members. Mass copyright infringement is the leak in the bottom of the bucket that is our industry or our economy. We need to fix this leak before our pressure on Spotify and other streaming services can work. And the only way to fix this leak is to reform through congressional action, DMCA Section 512. Once this happens, we find ourselves in a much better position to build leverage against streaming services. We must demand accountability from big tech platforms and protections that work for all music workers, not just the major label stars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron, Ben, and Aaron. And at this point, you can take a look in the chat. There's going to be a link where you can find a whole lot of information about our campaign and the work, and about all of these points that we are talking about. I'm seeing some specific questions coming in, and a lot of those will be addressed on that website link. So our first guest speaker tonight, well, he's not a guest, he's an MWA member. And I'd like to introduce Mark Rebo. He's a member of MWA and one of the fiercest voices advocating for streaming justice. He needs no introduction as one of the leading voices in a whole lot of scenes and just general guitar hero. So Mark.
Guitar villain, actually. But okay, first of all, very glad to see so many new faces showing up. I've been in this discussion for a long time because I've been a musician for a long time. I played on a lot of records in the, from the 80s on, and I saw, like all of us, post Napster, I saw my income from recording go down precipitously. And while the income was dropping, I started to hear the beginning of what would become an avalanche of jive. I mean, for 20 years, we heard stories that technological uplift was going to make us all a lot more money any day now. There was going to be new business models. They were going to have a long tail effect so that indie artists and avant-gardists were going to do much better than ever before. Very clever people were telling us that, well, no matter what we thought, information itself wanted to be free. The clever people told it, well, anyway, there was a lot of other jive. For 20 years, we waited for the tech industry stakeholders, the tech companies, to agree on standard technical measures to stop the looting of our industry. Well, time's up. Oh, yeah, and here's the key thing. For 20 years, apologists for these tech companies said, well, don't worry about it. Okay, things aren't quite great, but you can still tour. Well, brothers, sisters, and non-binary siblings, time's up, because COVID-19 was our moment of truth. For the last 2 years, we couldn't tour anymore. We were shut down. And while other industries were able to continue online, ours couldn't, because guess what? Nobody will buy what anyone can get for free. And so we were unemployed at over 60%, twice the average rates of the Great Depression. And when our pandemic unemployment insurance ran out in September, and the Omicron hit after that, we were unemployed without any benefits. So time's up. If the United States wants its $123 billion annual cultural economy back, we need streaming justice. We need Congress to do what it should have done 20 years ago. Time's up. We need STMs. And now they asked me to play a little thing, and I don't know what to play, but they told me to play it very shortly. So.
Thank you, Mark. Solidarity forever. So our next speaker is one of our closest allies. He sits on the advisory board of MWA, and we work with him and his organization very closely on a number of issues, including this one. This is Kevin Erickson of the Future of Music Coalition.
Hi, happy to be here tonight. So I've somehow, despite any like formal training or real access to the usual halls of power, I've ended up working in public policy for the last 10 years. And one of the things that I've noticed is that musicians are often trained to think that our voices don't matter, that we don't know enough about the laws that govern this space to play an active role in it, or that the policies themselves are just too complicated. And it is complicated, but it is not more complicated than routing the tour or setting up a pedal board or figuring out sidechain compression or holding a band together for 2 years. You know, you probably understand a whole lot more than many of the people making the laws. In so many ways, you are already an expert on your lived experience. In the process of trying to explain some of these issues to Congress, I actually got a whole bunch of puppets to try and make it simple for them. So I can try and recreate like some of the conversations that I have here. So this is Ricky, the recording artist. Ricky's really talented, but he is in this conflict with our Spotify guy here. See his hat? So Ricky says, "Hey, Spotify, your payouts are so small, I would have to exponentially grow the size of my audience to make sustainable money from you. And your free tier is driving the value of music down. And now you're using like this discovery mode thing to try and pay artists like me even less." Spotify then will come back and say, "You know, actually, you should be thanking us, because if it wasn't for us, people would just go listen for free on YouTube, which pays way less." Okay. So then Ricky, our recording artist here, goes to YouTube. The YouTube lady lost her hat, I'm sorry. And says, "Hey, YouTube, your payouts per play are like a third as much as Spotify, which is already an infinitesimal. And also I am bummed to have my music attracting people to an ad surveillance ecosystem where they end up getting recommendations for Ben Shapiro. And YouTube lady over here says, you know, actually you should be thanking us, because if it wasn't for us, people would just go listen for free on the radio. And anyway, if you want your music off of YouTube, you're probably going to have to do tons of uncompensated labor sending takedown notices all day. Good luck with that. So back to Ricky here. Ricky can go over to the radio stations and say, hey, big commercial radio conglomerates, you don't pay musicians at all, and you don't even really play local and diverse music anymore. You fired most of the DJs, replaced them with robots, but the fact that you don't pay distorts the whole market and lowers wages for all recording artists. And then Mr. Radio here can respond, actually, you should be thanking us. We give musicians so much exposure, and also if you forced us to pay you, we'd go out of business. Why are you such a mean, greedy jerk? So my point here is that this is complicated, but you can understand it. It's actually pretty accessible, but also that all of these problems in the music economy are deeply interrelated. You have to solve the 512 problem to really solve the Spotify problem. Solving the problem that radio doesn't pay is also a big component of that. Like all of these, as if we work on all of these problems together, you know, with a focus on the opportunity that we have right now in front of us on this 512 issue, on this fixing the safe harbor, making it more balanced, like we actually can make some permanent and lasting changes. But the main thing that I want you to take away is that you are an expert. If you go and talk to a member of Congress or a staffer, you are already having the most interesting conversation those people will have all day. So don't be intimidated by any of the process of any of the systems. Your voice matters, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I feel like we need to give you a special spot, like we need those videos up and available. I would pay a lot for the full series. Next, we're going to have a video testimony from another MWA member, Brittany. And Aaron, if you could go ahead and get that started.
Yeah, it's very topical. Some people were making the point in the chat that radio does pay in other countries, and you'll see some of that reflected in this testimonial.
Hi guys, how's everyone doing? I'm really sorry I can't be with you live at the event today. I wanted to pre-record and introduce myself. My name is Brittany Andrew. I'm a musician and band leader making records. I've been in New York since 2002, and I'm on the Economic Justice and the Digital Domain Committee with the Music Workers Alliance. And a bit about me, I started freelancing in New York, living on about under $15K a year from piano students and gigs from 2002 until 2019. I just wanted to share with you the cost of making my albums and share the money I've earned from digital streaming with you all today, and so that we can take out.
Sorry, I'm going to try to fix the volume really quick. Give me just a second.
To build toward more fair efforts in paying and getting paid for musicians, especially now that COVID has canceled touring. We're extremely more vulnerable. So let me tell you about the costs of making my dream album, Enemigo Reciprocati, which no one can pronounce because it's in Esperanto. But it was my dream to compose and release a jazz piano trio album. And I wrote the tunes from starting when I was 18, so from 2003 until 2016, and I got the money to record in about that time. So it took a long time. It cost me $4 grand to record, about $9 grand to press the physical, promote it, and release it on a label that had distribution. And so that's $14K there. And then it cost another $5 grand from the time I began playing out with my trio and paying my band $200 a night. So that's $100 for each player, for a bassist and a drummer in a piano trio, from 2013 until the present. So I've invested about 19 grand in making my own music with this trio alone. I have many other bands and projects that I've also budgeted and ledgered. You can check that out if you're interested. And so, yeah, so those are the costs. And now let me talk about the earnings. So I earned $1,200 in physical and digital sales from my label, Origin Records, and about $600 from touring in support of that album, despite 10,000 hours booking and managing myself and leading teams. So basically I earned about $12,000 in touring, and all of that got paid out, and I was left with $600. And then lastly, royalties, mostly radio royalties. I earned $1,200 in international and US radio royalties. So only a third of that, about 400 of which came from the US, and a smaller fraction yet from digital and streaming, which was $50. So the bulk of my international royalties came from Denmark. I apparently have one hit on the air in Denmark randomly. Thank God, thank you Denmark. I really hope I get to tour, an invitation to tour Denmark someday. That would be lovely. Yeah, so for example, I earned about, I also learned that it took 2 years for international royalties to kick in. So the record came out February of 2019, and it wasn't until April 2021 that all of the 2 years in international royalties came in. And suddenly I got like $400 in my publishing account and $400 in my writer share from CSAC. And I was like, what, is this a joke? So thank you, Denmark. You paid my rent for 1 month in April 2021. So I always will celebrate Denmark. And yeah, so you can see that CSAC reports this as other domestic royalties on their ledgers when they show digital streaming royalties. And it's a tiny fraction. I earned like 70 cents in digital streaming royalties from Spotify and iTunes. And, clearly the moral of the story is other countries' radio stations pay way more than the US. So Denmark paid me $800, the US paid me like $20, $40 in radio royalties. So streaming, way down. It's really just, for streaming to cover $50 out of the 18 grand total and 10 years of my life, about 17 years total of my life, making this project a reality, is just really abysmal. And so that's why I'm here. That's my spiel, and I'll try to keep it shorter. Thanks for letting me speak. Thanks for listening. And I urge you to please, musicians, artists, please join the Music Workers Alliance Economic Justice in the Digital Domain Committee. We have meetings Tuesdays at 2. And okay guys, now you know I'm broke, and hope you're having a nice night, and hope to see you soon. Thanks, bye.
What Brittany's talking about, as you all know, is not just her own experience, but a universal. I put out my first record 2 years ago. I'm still thousands of dollars in the red, even though I've had many thousands of streams and many copies sold. And I'm sure every one of you could tell a similar story. And it's just crazy that we have to wait decades even for us to recoup costs. It's something that many working class artists just simply can't afford to do, which is actually a tragedy for the music itself. Our next speaker is Jamie Raskin, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who has sent a video in support. And I will let Aaron play that now.
Hi, it's Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. I'm calling out to all my friends at the Music Workers Alliance. I want to thank you for launching the effort to reform Section 512 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And I'm so glad that you've been joined by the American Association of Independent Music, the Authors Guild, and the Future Music Coalition, who have sent representatives to the event to work in a coalition to restore the basic and essential rights of musicians. And I am foursquare in your camp on this issue, and I've heard from so many musicians who feel really strongly about it, and sympathetic artists and writers and others. And I've only heard from one person on the other side who said, well, no, I think that music should be free. And I said, hey, groceries should be free, and rent should be free, and transportation should be free. But if it's not, musicians can't be cheated out of their labor by having other people enjoy the benefits of their hard work and their creation without paying something. And other businesses should not be ripping them off in that way. That's just, to me, like an essential moral precept. So in any event, I'm on your side. Musicians are struggling today. It's getting harder and harder for musicians to make ends meet, and we have to make sure that musicians are not being systematically stripped of their life's blood and sweat and tears by the way we design our business institutions. So let's go ahead and pass this, and let's keep working to make sure that every musician has the means to a real livelihood. Thanks for what you're doing.
Awesome, and I can see the excitement in the chat at what Congressman Raskin said. We are going to have a few musical interludes throughout the evening from music workers and MWA members who support this campaign. So Aaron, if you want to play Steve Beck's brief video.
Hi, my name is Steve Beck. I'm a pianist, and I'm making this video in support of Music Workers Alliance. This is a group that's doing super important work about streaming justice for musicians. That's obviously a very important issue for us, and a lot of other issues about copyright and making sure that we're protected. So thank you, and the website is musicworkersalliance.org. I'm going to play just 2 short movements of George Walker's Second Piano Sonata.
Huge thanks to Steve Beck They're performing music by George Walker. Next up, I'd love to introduce Brad Watts, copyright staffer for Senator Tillis. We've been working with Senator Tillis's office, and we really want to thank him for all the work that he has done on copyright and artist rights. And a huge thanks to Brad Watts for all of his work. We're delighted to introduce you to speak to us tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry my video isn't on. I fell when I was getting out of the shower this morning, and I look like my cousin who used to beat me up when I was a kid visited me. So my apologies, but I figured I'd spare you all my face. Again, thank you for having me here, and thank you to all of you for sharing your testimonials about how copyright law is impacting you. As any of you who have followed Senator Tillis's work knows, he is a strong proponent of copyright law and copyright reform. And it's for the very reason you're talking about. It's so easy in this debate to divide it into big tech or big content or big movies and big music versus big platforms and big ISPs. But the reality is there are hundreds of thousands of people in the ecosystem that aren't, big tech or big content. They're people who are trying to make a living, just like all of you, who are bringing so much joy and beauty to our world, whether they're authors, music artists, independent filmmakers, and the current copyright laws don't work for them, and it shafts them. And this isn't just because our digital copyright laws are outdated, although they are. It's also because copyright piracy is so rampant. That's why Senator Tillis has been so focused on what we think is the least common denominator here. Let's at least fix copyright piracy. Everyone can and should agree that at a bare minimum, we need to take care of copyright piracy. And then once we do that, let's turn to these bigger kind of generational issues about digital copyright law. He spent all of 2020 focused on reforming the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. He's still working in a bipartisan manner with Senator Leahy on DMCA reform. We're continuing to work on copyright piracy reform. We were happy to work with our colleagues in 2020 on closing the felony streaming loophole. We can't wave a wand and fix everything overnight, but there are small things we can and should do immediately, and there's no reason not to do them. And I, again, just want to thank all of you for all the work you're doing, your advocacy. Thank you for supporting our office, and please know you can always contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. You can always contact Senator Tillis. He believes strongly in copyright for the very reasons you're saying. It's people's lives and livelihoods that are on the line. So thank you again. Thank you for your advocacy. I'm really glad to be here and look forward to continuing to hear your testimonials.
Thank you so much, Brad. And you don't know how much it means to all of us to have an ally in the Senate on these issues and to give us a sense of hope and show us the way forward. So we really appreciate that, your and Senator Tillis's work. Our next speaker is MWA member Allison Phillips. Just give us 1 second to queue up video. Oh, and Brad, I think if you meant that for the public chat, that was a direct message to me, just so you know.
Hi, my name is Allison Phillips. I'm a 30-year-old trumpet player, band leader, composer, trumpet teacher, and barista living here in Brooklyn, New York. I have an album out on Spotify that's been out for about a year now called Placement and Longing, which is with my trio featuring Alessandro Fungaro and Robin Van Ryn. We have around 126,950 streams, I believe, as of today. And I think I've probably seen around $150 from that. This was a very low budget record. It only cost around, say, $1,500 to produce, record, and all of that. I really don't expect to make that money back from any sort of sales or royalties related to the recording. Musicians work super hard. It's super expensive to live in any major city, which is pretty much where you have to live if you're going to be a working musician at this point. And it's really hard to find time to create original music. like I said, I am mainly a musician, but I still have a barista job. I have a master's degree in jazz trumpet performance, and it's still necessary in order to pay rent and live in New York City. I do think it's definitely time to allow artists to have a fair share of their royalties so we can keep creating original music and interesting music and keep developing.
Thank you very much for that testimony. It's Allison Phillips, MWA member. And I think so much of what we're hearing tonight will resonate with so many of you, certainly resonates deeply with me. I'd love to introduce another MWA member next. He is working on streaming justice issues with MWA, jazz bass player extraordinaire, teaching music business currently at New School. And his record company is PM Records, and this is Gene Perla. Gene, welcome.
Hello, everybody. As a jazz bassist, I've had the good fortune to make music with Miles Davis, Joni Mitchell, Nina Simone, Sonny Rollins, Sarah Vaughan, Elvin Jones, and many others. In the early 70s, I started a jazz record label and am currently up to 55 releases. It's basically a one-man show that's a labor of no profit. In those early days, LPs, cassettes, and eventually CDs made a modest profit, and one of my Elvin Jones projects sold 10,000 copies. The only thing left for me during these pandemic times are digital MP3 sales and occasional CD diehards. Speaking about the pandemic, in 2019 I performed 179 live gigs. 2020 diminished to 57, and 2021 partially advanced to 120. On top of that, after adjunct teaching music at Lehigh University for 20 years, I was let go with no parachute. And this is after introducing 2 music business courses that morphed into a music business minor. Crying the blues? No way, Jose. I've kept busy with record company, music publishing, and recording studio activities. As my sweet wife is fond of saying, one door closes and another one opens. Zoonosis has afforded me the time and definite interest in becoming involved with initiatives that, thinking positively, will turn the tide on how we creatives have been dealt a crushing blow to our spirit and financial well-being. If you are not familiar with our federal law, Section 512 of Title 17, I entreat you to do a bit of research, some of which we here at Music Workers Alliance can provide. It makes me angry that the streaming services are making boatloads of cash riding on our music. It's akin to the old story of radio broadcasters not wanting to pay recording artists while they continue to make buku bucks. Well, that's another fight. I'm a longtime member of the American Federation of Musicians of the United States and Canada, and can attest to the power of the many. Adjunct professionals teaching at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music in New York City have a collective bargaining agreement, a contract, with the school, which provides us with many benefits including health care and pension building. Now is the time for us to come together and create voices strong enough to influence those government officials to do the right thing. If not now, when? That's my story for today, and thank you.
Thank you, Gene. That's spot on. I'm going to now pass it to Brandon Ross, another MWA member and a guitarist active in the New York jazz and creative music community, the guitarist also of the band Harriet Tubman. Brandon, whenever you're ready.
Hey, thanks, Philip. Hello, everyone. it's good to listen and it's good to hear everybody's stories. And it's also really difficult because as I'm listening and referencing my own experience and understanding what people are talking about when they describe their experience, this question came forward for me, this essential thing. And it says, like, who are we? What is the service that we provide? What is a musician? And we deal in something that is uniquely ephemeral from all the art forms. It doesn't have physicality, but it touches you. It has no shape, yet it can fill volumes of space, literally. And it's just, I mean, there's something about who we are and what we do and how that impacts the quality of human life that should be beyond questioning or beyond reproach, and that were we living in a society that truly recognized itself and the value of what it is to be human, we would occupy a very different place in that society. So I always come to this place, and I come to this place where we're sitting and we're all talking and we're attempting to be not reactive. We're attempting to be clear and to deal with all of these things. And we're talking about the laws and the structure of things, and all of that is so. And yet, if there was one full day, and this might be impossible, but if there was one full day where 10 full minutes in that day around the planet was devoid of any musical sound, I dare people to imagine what that would be like. And I don't mean in any positive sense. I got this t-shirt that I have from Old Tower Records in Japan, and I just want to share this with you all. There's nothing further from the truth. And music is sound, is vibration, and any physicist worth their degree will tell you that everything is vibration. And yet here we are debating the value of our existence, debating the value of our service, of our skill sets. Someone being highly trained with a master's degree in music who's got to do all of these different things and just to kind of break even. I know the last Harriet Tubman record, the band that I'm in with Melvin Gibbs and JT Lewis, we got a royalty statement shortly after the record first came out, and I'm looking through it, and it's the same old thing. Well, gee, maybe I can use this piece of paper to make a bookmarker from when it's done, maybe be useful in that way. And I saw this thing that said 10,000 streams, and I thought, wow. And I look, and it was $43, which was then divided between the three of us. And I just am, I'm just beside myself. When I first came to New York in the early 80s, and Mark Rebo and I go way back, we're colleagues and friends, and the scene was like a low level paying gig might be like $100. And you go and you maybe play 2 sets somewhere and you got $100. Well, that hasn't changed other than to become less money, to become a situation where then people were passing the hat. They were busking indoors, inside a restaurant, inside a bar, facilitating the sale of the cost of a glass of wine or a plate of food, which would be, in some cases, 5 times more than the money someone might make that night, just being in there. And this was considered a standard. Now we have younger musicians who are coming out and need to develop their skill by playing, by being on the scene. And how can they develop while withholding their work, withholding their expression? It's very difficult. And yet, on one level, perhaps we ought to consider that. The absence of a thing might really illustrate for people, beyond anything we could say, the importance of this, the importance of what music is, the place it needs to hold in our monetary compensation concept. When I started making records and recording with people and been on a lot of records like Mark, and been on the road with a lot of people, it was doable. And in many cases, depending on who you were out with, it was more than doable. It was quite comfortable. I remember one year I made, I don't know, $100,000 without realizing it. And if I made $100,000 over the last 5 years, I must have had some kind of crazy habit that made it disappear from my consciousness. But that was reasonable. That was reasonable expectations. I remember sitting down with the band leader saying, okay, well, I want you all to know in this band, you can expect to make $30,000 per quarter as a minimum with my band. And it wasn't the only band that I was in. And that was the expectation. That was the standard. The things that people share nowadays, the stories that are being told, the experiences that are out there we know are real, are just horror stories to me, where a musician questions whether they can expect to be compensated for spending, let's say $1,500 or $3,000 to make an entire record, which doesn't offset mixing costs, mastering costs, marketing costs, all the rest of it. It's just really bottom line outrageous. Okay, so now we apply ourselves, or I apply myself to looking at things on paper that talk about, the issue with 512, very valid. And then meanwhile, the technocrats who talk about content, that have put what I do into the phrase of content, which essentially has reduced it to a 0 and a 1, which has no bearing on what its value is, what it does, not how it can be utilized, but what it does, how it serves. And this piece has to be part and parcel with any other legislative action that goes on. We need to connect with the power. It was a Gandhi who said something like, the moral authority, the power of moral authority, that has to be brought forward with these things. I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but I just feel that is so crucial to this thing. We are magicians, we are healers, we are people who pull out of nothing gems, diamonds, gold, mystery. We bring healing. We make the world a place that people want to live in and share with others. It's a universal language that's been proven. I've been in places and not been able to say a word to somebody else. They sat up and played something for me and I played something for them. And it was an immediate fraternity, an immediate community. I don't know too many other things that do that. And these things are connected to us in our heart as a heartbeat. That basic pulse of where we begin and the breath that we have that keeps us alive. And that must be repeated over and over and over again to these people who are dealing with this as material, as a 0 and a 1. Streaming is not going to be put back in the bottle. That genie is out there. It's a great vehicle for getting things from one place to another and sharing. And yet we have to find a way to drive this home, get this legislation changed, get to a model that enables us to do what we do, support ourselves, and to profit, to prosper, not just get by. And so with that, I would just want to say again, no music, no life, or at least no life that I want to live. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brandon. It's always so good to hear from you. You're so eloquent and you speak right to the heart and core of these issues. And what's so amazing about what Brandon just said is that, it highlights the livelihood of musicians is the livelihood of music. The future of the ability of musicians to sustain themselves is one and the same as the ability of music itself to go on, and for us to keep hearing from all the voices that we want to hear from. We just have a couple more speakers before we let you all get on with your evening. The next up is Mary Rassenberger, the CEO of the Authors Guild. The Authors Guild is a crucial coalition partner with MWA. We've been working together along with a number of other organizations which represent creative workers to advocate for Section 512 reform and better copyright protections. We've been working with some Congress people and senators on this, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have Mary with us tonight. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Phil. And Brandon, thank you for that. You almost brought tears to my eyes. I mean, it's so true. I obviously represent writers, and writers are, you know, in pretty much the same boat. We regularly survey authors, and incomes are down well over 40% in the last decade. And that's for full-time authors, with incomes down to a mean of 20,000. So, and the mean includes the really high-end ones too. So it's really tough out there, and it literally breaks my heart. So I want to thank you for inviting me today, everybody at MWA. As Phil said, we've started this coalition of creator organizations to work on piracy and 512 issues. And it's because our interests are mostly aligned with the big creative industry, but not completely, because it's the creators who really are bearing the brunt of piracy right now. And I don't have time to go in and explain why that's the case, but it is. We're bearing the brunt. And of consolidation and the big internet monopolies. So what I want to talk about today, though, is just, I am a copyright lawyer. I'm a longtime copyright expert. I've actually been working on 512 since it was enacted in '98. So I'm going to give you a little background about why the law has not helped prevent piracy and what kind of amendments that more specifically that we need. So it's a little bit of the legal nitty-gritty, and very high level and very fast. And I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards if you want. So as somebody alluded to earlier, Section 512 was enacted in '98 to give online service providers immunity for the infringement of their users, right? So if their users conducted copyright infringement, they wouldn't be liable. But if, and only if, they cooperated with copyright owners to keep infringing content off of their services. So 512 very clearly had a dual purpose, and that was in the legislative history, real clearly. Two-pronged: to ensure that the internet sector would grow and thrive by being able to be immune from liability, and also, very importantly, to prevent mass piracy on the internet. So the first of those prongs has worked pretty well, pretty damn well. The richest companies in the world are now these big internet companies, you know, richer than most small countries. But it hasn't really worked to keep piracy off the internet. And I'm going to explain why. You know, it's not that the statute was badly written. It was pretty well written. The problem was the early cases in the early 2000s. The courts didn't really understand the nature of the two-way bargain in 512 and how important it was to have the service providers, I'll call them OSPs, actively cooperate with copyright owners. It was the go-go days of the internet. And really, you know, no court wanted to come out and be seen as slowing down the progress of technology. I don't know if you can remember how excited people were about the internet back then. So there are several conditions in 512 besides this notice and take down provisions that I'm sure you're all familiar with. OSPs would fall out of immunity, one, if they had actual knowledge of infringing activity and failed to take it down expeditiously. Two, have awareness of facts or circumstances from which infringing activity is apparent, in which case they have to take it down expeditiously. So this is both actual knowledge or this awareness of facts or circumstances where, you know, it's apparent that there's infringement on your service, okay? And then the third one was, it's the traditional vicarious liability standard. If the OSP financially benefited from, or it's, I shouldn't be using the past tense because it's still on the law. If they financially benefit from the infringing activity and they have the right and ability to take it down, and they don't, they're out of the safe harbor. What happened in the early 2000s in parallel cases in the Ninth and the Second Circuit, And these are important circuits for copyright because it's California and New York. It's where most copyright cases are brought. Both of these courts said that for any of these to be true, this actual knowledge, awareness of infringing activity, and even, believe it or not, the ability to control standard. For any of those to happen and throw the OSP out of the safe harbor, the OSP has to have specific knowledge of specific infringing content at a specific URL on their website. So it's a really high standard of specific knowledge. And they have to know that it's infringing, because how is the OSP supposed to know if something's infringing? The idea is only the copyright owner knows that. So they basically, what it means is a practical matter to have that kind of specific knowledge and know it's infringing. The only way you really get that is through a sworn statement with a formal takedown notice. And we all know how hard it can be to send takedown after takedown, and some OSPs make it particularly difficult. So we're left with this notice and takedown statute, which, as we all know, it ends up in this game of whack-a-mole where things get put right back up by the infringer. And we have found in the book world, often in multiple copies. You know, we think they're just automated. One copy comes down, 10 goes up. And the reason the courts got here, there was a reason, is because there's another provision in 512M that says to be eligible for the safe harbors, that can't be conditioned on a service monitoring, an OSP monitoring its service, okay? But what they took that to mean is that the OSP never had to look under the hood. So even if they have this awareness, which is called red flags knowledge, you'll hear people using that term. If you had awareness of facts and circumstances of infringing activity, you didn't have to look under the hood. You only were presumed to have knowledge if somebody handed it to you on a silver platter. So it's a little bit like saying, you know, you're driving along in a car and there's smoke coming out from under the hood. Well, you're not responsible for stopping and looking under the hood unless somebody pulls you over, opens the hood for you, and drags you around and say, look, there's a fire right there, you know? So that's not to over exaggerate, but that's kind of where we are with the statute right now. And it's not the way not the kind of standard we apply in most of the rest of US law. But there is another provision in 512 that is a solution, and others have alluded to it earlier. There is a requirement for OSPs to be eligible for the safe harbor to accommodate and not interfere with standard technical measures, which is a defined term. We use the term STM, okay? And we all know that's the most effective way to control piracy today. If an OSP adopts effective STMs, they keep most of the piracy off the site. And we have this in the ebook world. Amazon uses fingerprinting technology and not that much gets through. And when it does get through, authors tell us, we tell them it gets taken down. So great, we have this provision already, but not so fast. Because the first problem is that STMs are defined as technical measures developed pursuant to a broad consensus of copyright owners and OSPs in an open, fair, voluntary multi-industry process. But this kind of convening has never happened, of course, because OSPs, because of the way the law has been interpreted, they have no incentive to engage in this kind of process. And the second problem is that STMs we use today are technical measures that the service providers have to adopt or implement. So when the DMCA was written back in the late 90s, they were thinking of DRM, the types of technical measures that content owners would put on their own works. And in that case, it's, you know, the OSP was supposed to accommodate them and not interfere. So we need to get that changed too. So the Copyright Office, as was mentioned, and others have suggested that the Copyright Office do a rulemaking. They did have roundtables about 1.5 years ago. I participated and I think some MWA members did. And this would be another way to develop STMs that would fall under the statute. So when we talk about we need STMs, that's what we're talking about, is another way to get STMs into 512. So this would be a rulemaking, probably like the 1201 rulemaking, even if you're familiar with it. We think it's an excellent idea. MWA came to us early November with a letter sort of calling for this. We wholeheartedly support it, as do other organizations in our little coalition. We've got some working amendments on that, so we're looking forward to seeing something on that. We're with MWA and this group of like 15 other organizations lobbying for this. We've also suggested amending the red flags and the ability to control infringing activity provisions to overrule the courts and make it clear that those provisions actually mean what they say. But there's not much appetite, I'll be honest with you, for that in Congress, because the OSPs, the service providers, have come out strongly opposing these kinds of amendments to red flags knowledge or the duty to monitor, which is unfortunate, but that's where we are. But the fact is, if we got STMs, workable STMs that OSPs have to adopt into the statute through a rulemaking, that would get us what we need. Pretty much, it would get us enough. So that's really important. But that's with respect to user-generated content sites like YouTube. There is another type of piracy that this won't necessarily address, and that is the foreign-based websites. And we have big problems with them in the book world with ebook piracy. These are foreign-based sites that are devoted to piracy. And the problem is, even if you bring a litigation and you win, the search engines, and they're not supposed to operate in the US, they sell or they give away mostly US works to US consumers. And sometimes they sell. The search engines do still link to them. And you think it would be a simple sell to go to Congress and say, look, these are, foreign-based criminal enterprises, they usually are, who are taking advantage of US citizens and profiting from US creators. They're sucking money out of the US economy. You'd think that'd be an easy sell, but actually the OSPs, again, have convinced many members of Congress that it'll break the internet, is a phrase that you hear, if they have to hide search results from these pirate sites. Now, I'm not going to go into this in any more detail. I know there's a solution, far better minds than mine, technical minds, the OSPs. I'm sure if they get together, they can figure out a way to help prevent these foreign-based pirate sites from profiting off of US creators. But I just wanted to mention that because it is a sort of separate area of piracy. And that's all I have. So I'm happy to talk to anyone offline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. The coalition that MWA is participating in has been really kind of amazingly led by Mary, and there's a lot of very, very great things going on. So we're so thankful that that Mary's doing that work, and that she took time this evening to kind of explain some of the more technical matters of this issue. I just want to note that something that was put in the chat. If you're interested in more details about this, or even more of the basics, you can find them on our website. That was linked in the chat. So we have another quick video from another coalition member, Richard Burgess of A2IM. And then we have a few more, just the last minute or final musical performances for the evening. Here we go, Richard Burgess.
My name is Richard James Burgess. I'm president and CEO of the American Association of Independent Music, or A2IM, the trade association representing more than 600 independently owned and diverse American record labels. Thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. I think I should start by telling you a bit about my background because it's relevant to our common interests. During high school, I started working as a musician in bands, became a studio musician and a touring musician. I ultimately signed to 6 major labels, produced gold, platinum, and multi-platinum records for the major labels and some independents. During that period, I also wrote hit songs and sang on hit records. I've managed producers, engineers, and artists for many years, and then I ran the business side of Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, during which time I joined the board of A2IM. After a period as chair of the board, I was offered the job of CEO more than 6 years ago. I'm a drummer by trade, and for most of my career, in one capacity or another, I've made a living from recorded music. I do believe it would have been significantly more difficult for me to have had the career I had if I'd started working in the 2000s. A2IM represents independent labels, and many of the problems independent labels face are the same as your problems. Above all else, A2IM is dedicated to maximizing the return of value from the use of copyrights to copyright holders and creators. Yesterday, Aaron Edgecombe and I spoke to the US Copyright Office on the adoption and implementation of standardized technical measures as intended under Section 512I of the DMCA, which we believe could help small independent music creators detect and combat infringement. As I said on that session, we're not interested in having our music taken down. We do demand the opportunity to be paid fairly for the use of our creative endeavors. The notice and takedown system as it stands is functionally useless for small labels and artists. We have very little leverage, and among other options, standard technical measures could lay the foundation for a more beneficial licensing environment for creators, especially on UGC sites. But the DMCA and STMs are just one of many challenges we face in trying to make a living. There's so much more that needs to be fixed. We're deeply concerned about Spotify's Discovery Mode program that offers artists a significantly reduced royalty rate for increased streams. Any artist getting increased streams under this program is cannibalizing organic streams by another artist. And consumers are unaware that they're listening to a paid ad for a track that they didn't choose to listen to. And we think this will start a race to the bottom for already unsustainable royalty rates. Likewise, we stand opposed to payola at radio, which is alive and costing artists a fortune. Not only does radio not pay us for the use of our music that it sells ads against, but we also have to pay to get our music played on many stations. So at the same time, we're part of the Music First Coalition fighting for an AM/FM royalty on Capitol Hill via our American Music Fairness Act. It's insane that we have to fight for the right to get paid when radio uses our music, our work, our property. There's no other industry that's required by law to give its primary product for free to another industry to make money off of. iHeart just announced today another boom quarter in terms of profits, and yet these conglomerates plead poverty when it comes to artist royalties. We also have an antitrust bill sponsored by Representative Deutsch that would allow groups of artists or small labels to collectively negotiate with the tech behemoths to try to level the playing field and get fairer deals. But this is just a small taste. There's so much more being done and so much more that needs to be done. I'm sure you've all read how well the music industry is doing and the massive profits it's reaping from streaming. And I'm equally sure that that doesn't jive with your daily experience. And no wonder. Despite the recovery of music industry revenues from its nadir in 2015, it's important to note that in inflation-adjusted dollars, our industry's revenues in 2020 only just inched above half of our peak US revenues from 1999. It's not surprising that we're feeling the pain. I could talk about this all night. It needs to be fixed, and I'm greatly honored that you asked me to speak here tonight. If we work together as an industry, we can solve these problems, and we must for the sake of the future of music and musicians. Thank you so much.
Peace, peace, y'all. My name is Jeanette Berry, and I am an MWA member and a steering committee member, and I'm here to join this event in spirit and in song. If you know the song, sing along. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our freedom. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our freedom. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our children. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our children. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
Yeah.
Yes, so thanks so much to Richard and Jeanette. I'm going to pass it to Phil right now.
Thank you, Jeanette. That was amazing. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mary. Now, before we move on to our very final performance, I want to thank all the speakers and guests and politicians who've been here and who are working with us. Now, one quick thing before we go. It's crucial that all the things we've been talking about, all of our stories actually make it to the politicians, or else none of this work really matters at the end of the day, because they need to actually hear from us. They need to actually get what we're talking about and feel what we're talking about. So I want to see a show of hands. Who here is willing to fill out the survey and to write a letter to Congress? I'm going to put them in the chat right now. Oh, Carmen did as well. So who's willing to do that? Great. So by my count, that's about, I see nobody not raising their hand pretty much. That's about 70 people right here. That's a great start. Now we need to not only do it ourselves, we need to get our friends, our bandmates, our collaborators, our colleagues to do that as well. So who here is willing to get 5 colleagues, 5 bandmates, 5 friends to also fill out the survey and the letter to Congress? Okay, great. A little mental math, and I think we're going to have a few hundred off the bat letters going to Congress. That's fantastic. I'll send out those links again to everybody who's here via email, so you have it again after tonight. But there they are in the Zoom chat again. Kathy, do you have anything else?
I just wanted to give a huge thanks to all the speakers and performers tonight, as well as to all of you who helped put this evening and all of this information together. Speaking of information, take a look one last time in the chat where Carmen is dropping all those links, and read more if you want to check out what's on the website. All of these things that we've been talking about tonight, you will find on that link. And one last thing is, most of you have probably seen us on social media. We're on all the platforms. So find us, and we are dropping information and stories about this every single day. So hope to see you there. And those links are also in the chat currently.
And we have one final performance from the great Bill Frisell. Aaron, you want to cue that up? All right, I'm gonna unmute everybody right now, and let's go off into the end of our evening with solidarity on 3. 1, 2, 3. Solidarity.
Yes, thank you.
Solidarity forever.
Well done. Beautifully done.
Yes, thanks, y'all.
Congratulations, that was great.
Great work, guys.
So much.
Thank you.
Colin.
See you up there.
Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you,
Kathy and
everybody.
Phil, for hosting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Maybe things will change.
Thank you, everybody.
We're going to change things.